That is correct.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
all right then. So the meeting is called to order. Khaled, I would ask you, would you be able to take notes or minutes, at least initially, until the committee's stood up and elect the secretary?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks. So I want to thank everyone for joining on the call this evening. So this is the actual first meeting of our nominations committee. So our nominations committee is actually something that is called for in our bylaws. This starts off the election cycle. So the preliminary task would have been to stand up the committee, and I thank all those people who have volunteered and are here this evening. So this first meeting, one of the objectives of this meeting would be to, one, select the chairman, because that is one of the roles of this is one of the few committees, one of the only committees that the chair does not select. The chair of the board does not select the chair of the committee. So the chair of the committee will be selected from amongst you. You'll have an opportunity to discuss that and deliberate. And then after that, the committee will begin the process. We'll begin the discussion on setting up the process for the community board elections, which are scheduled to happen in June. So the way we do it, it's a three-pronged process. So first of all, again, it's the setting up of the committee that we did in the April meeting. In May, the committee itself will meet, they will select the chair, and they will begin the process of canvassing the board. So this will be the outreach that will be conducted to the board in terms of ascertaining if there's any interest in serving, in actually running for one of the positions. So that, it's being done by phone, but we can actually do that by email as well. And that'll be some of the conversation that'll happen between the committee in terms of timeframes and any points of information that they want to make sure are communicated. So the committee would meet, they would perform that canvass. At the May meeting, what will happen is the results of that canvass will be shared with the board in terms of who's interested in running for what positions. Per our bylaws, at that time, anyone who wishes, who hasn't indicated their desire to run, can be nominated from the floor or can self-nominate. So that happens in the May meeting. Now, once that's done and we finish that process in May, what happens is the ballots are generated based on any nominations that have been received and made public at the board at the May meeting. When we get to June and the actual election is run, what will happen there is anyone who's running, who's made themselves known and is nominated, their names will be on the ballot. Plus, but there is a provision for a write-in candidate, so members can run as well. Other than I say they can run. Members can write in a candidate, but those who have declared themselves are those names that will actually be on the ballots. And then we proceed where in the elections in June, candidates are elected by a voted majority of the board present and voting. All right. I hope that provided an overview of the process. Are there any questions so far?
Is that May meeting's on the 23rd? That's the general meeting, or is there a special meeting for this?
No, that's the May meeting. So the 23rd,
okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a little bit of work that would need to get done between now and that May meeting, the general board meeting, in terms of sending out the initial canvas. But that I think over the last couple of years, and Primo has served as a chair of the nominations committee as well. He would definitely be prepared to speak to that as well in terms of the process that they followed. But we've done that where the initial canvas. So instead of calling 49 members, you can send a correspondence to the board, and those members who wish to, who already know that they want to run can just, identify themselves. And then after that, anyone who hasn't responded, the committee could decide what's the method of outreach for that. If it's additional emails, if they divide it amongst the committee, you make phone calls, just in terms of determining if there's any other interest in terms of running prior to the board meeting.
Great. Thanks for providing the overview, Fred. Can you, for the sake of us, remind us what are the positions that are available to run for?
Absolutely. So all offices are open. All officers serve for 1-year terms. So every year we elect all the officers. So the board positions, the officer positions are the chairperson, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, the executive secretary, the treasurer, and we elect 2 members at large. Okay, so those are 7 positions that are elected. I know we just recently elected an interim treasurer, but that was just in the interim. This election in June will be for the officers for the next upcoming year, 2023 through 24.
Great. Seven positions, correct?
Correct.
All right.
I know some of the positions, but can you identify who they are now currently, or is that not relevant?
I mean, I can identify them, but to the extent I don't want to necessarily establish any entitlement or incumbency there, where it's like everybody's running, or everyone will have to rerun for their seats if they wish to. So right now, currently, I'm serving as chair. First vice chair is Warren Burke. Second vice chair is currently Francisco Leopold. Executive secretary is Linda Watson Lord. Treasurer, our interim treasurer is the Mina Lagute. And our members at large are Nicholas Almanor and Kyrie Aline.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate it, Fred.
Absolutely. And again, while I mentioned that those are the current officers, everyone has to run as well. So they would have to indicate their intention to seek a re-election to those positions.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Any other big questions from folks? Fred, Jay Sorid is here and has his hand raised.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. Yes, Mr. Sorid, you're recognized.
Great. I want to know, is the nominating committee going to have any questions, as far as the campaign issues, whatever the issues are, like, could they be asked about, how do you feel about, like Vital Brooklyn? How do you feel about oversaturation and density? How do you feel about, the upzoning? And also, what is your job positions for conflict of interest? Everybody, you can't have more than 25% members who are from the city. So can people say what they do for work? If somebody works for the city, people may want to know it. If somebody works for, if they're an architect who works for a major firm, that's involved with Vital Brooklyn, people want to know it.
Are you looking at me?
What's that?
There's actually a lot of Vital Brooklyns. I'm only working on one of them. But fair enough.
Which is the Kingsbrook Estates.
Correct. Yeah.
And John Wuffling is a amazing architect. If he's one of the principals of Datner,
yes.
The work they do is incredible. They did the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, which is incredible. Really a high talented guy. But I also wanted to just mention if there's any conflict of interest, and if you could also mention, like if any of the people on the board who are nominating, are they on advisory committees? If somebody's on an advisory committee, they may be close with homeless shelters, and there's that potential conflict. So could we establish, because I know several members, I'm not going to say it, who are on advisory boards for $1 million corporations, and advisory boards who advise on that. So there's people on this board who are on the Kings County Advisory Board for the hospitals, okay? There's people who may be part of like a homeless shelter advisory board. People should know what associations people are part of, all the conflicts, what people work for, whether they get state money, how they feel on different issues. And these issues should be for the public and also for people voting. There should be questions on campaign issues. What do you think about that?
Do you feel like there's if there's money involved, like if someone's on as a paid position, that is like a higher level of disclosure, or is that like a threshold issue for you?
I feel, since people are public servants and it's a volunteer position, I think people should give as much disclosure as they can, just in terms of a LinkedIn, like a LinkedIn resume. Everybody has LinkedIn. Put your resume out there. I mean, John, you were forthcoming and you told everybody right off the bat, even before I said it, you said, listen, I'm an architect. I deal with community projects around, and you disclosed it ahead of time. Haven't heard that from other people. So there should be a disclosure. I think the conflict of interest rules are, if you're working on a specific project, and you can't vote on it. That's the conflict of interest laws, which is a very high level. I think that it should be an increased amount of disclosure, because if somebody is on a advisory committee for, let's say, the Kings, like the hospitals, for Kings County Hospital, and if they're meeting with different people from, let's say, Canva, and Canva has a $100 million housing project that's going on in the district, and if the people could potentially meet on off hours. I received information from a FOIL that said that there are chairs of committees who are meeting with real estate developers during the daytime. I'm uncomfortable just that people are meeting on off hours. So I'm for much more disclosure of who's on an advisory committee. I'm against people meeting with real estate developers on off hours. And if they do, they should tell everybody about it. Because there's like, you know how much the projects are worth, John, like Kingsborough is $430 million.
Yeah, it's a huge project.
So
So let me,
Yeah.
sorry.
John, if I could,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just going to that. So I think, and if, let me see if I can cover the questions that were for you in there.
Sure.
With respect to, backgrounds or speaking about their experiences, typically the committee would make that recommendation in terms of if there's a particular format they want to happen. What we've done in recent times is that we've requested for bios to be submitted by candidates, which typically are going to be shared with the board members, so at least that way they can kind of get a sense of who the members are, their experience, if there's any professional experiences relevant to the board, or any other, anything else that they might bring to bear in terms of the office that they're looking for. I would say that I would probably defer to the committee, or I'll leave it to the committee in terms of having that conversation if they want something more extensive. The only thing I would say is that more extensive probably would mean on the sense of you'd have to plan for that, you'd have to coordinate resources, you have to work through the district office, kind of find a time for that to happen, make sure the board is able to support those, plus notification requirements and everything that happen with that. So if it's going to be something much bigger than that, that's a conversation that would have to happen. Obviously, you can have the conversation. Whether the board is able to support it might be the question. So to that extent, hold on, if I can finish.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. Now, with respect to conflict, to conflicts, for example, I think one of the things you pointed out was no more than 25% of the board is supposed to be city employees. That is something that is done as part of the vetting process through Borough Hall. So that is not something done at the district level. That is actually taken care of on the borough level, where they're embedding the candidates to the board. They keep track of those numbers. So that question is probably more appropriate for the office of the borough president in that respect. Now, with respect to the conflicts of interest laws, what happens in that case, it's not necessarily in terms of being an officer or on the board. It's on a case-by-case basis in terms of there are matters that come before the board which involve you specifically in terms of if you have a financial interest or if you have a relative or a loved one who has a financial interest in something that the board is voting on. At that point, the duty is for that member to definitely self-report that they have the conflict. At that point, they are allowed to participate in the discussion, but the only thing is that they're required to recuse themselves from a vote on that. But that doesn't preclude them, again, from running for an office unless there is a specific interest in, that's going to, preclude them from serving at all in terms of an office or position. I think those were most of them. Were there any other questions? I'm sorry. And I think you said you had a follow-up point.
Yeah. Just to respond to that, it sounds like that this is the conflict of interest rules of what they are, what they should be. Could be a complicated discussion. Make it easy. Make it simple. Everybody gives their LinkedIn profile. We live in a world where everybody's got a LinkedIn profile, everything for business. Everybody posts a LinkedIn profile. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, and if you're not, officially retired, people should question that. Because how the hell do you make money?
There may be some privacy issues in there, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate for the board to require that. That would be my comment towards that.
You're right. Let's ask people if they want to voluntarily disclose it. It's a public profile. People could see it. I looked at yours, Fred. If somebody has it, ask the people.
I appreciate the suggestion, and the nominations committee can definitely discuss it. Which are the correct bandwidths to pursue folks disclosing?
Okay, so I'll leave with one last sentence, and the sentence is: ask people if they want to volunteer their LinkedIn profile. That's it.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. All right, we also have Teresa here with a hand raised. Teresa, why don't you go for it?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I don't have a LinkedIn profile, just by the way, and I don't intend to get one, but I'm not running at this time. Although I do agree wholeheartedly that everybody should submit a bio with all the details that Jay brought up with their workplace and whatever it is they do to suss out if there's a conflict in interest, because I think these positions are very important and we need to trust people. So I would like to know that. And I do know that this is my second year as a board member. And last year not everybody even submitted a bio. So I'd like to see that, and I'd like to be able to ask people questions who are running before I vote. So I hope we're able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay. We've heard,
Well, let me ask, will a resume suffice?
Yeah, I think great. Just basic information about especially
Oh,
the conflicts of interest.
yeah, definitely.
right.
Um,
Yeah, if I could, I mean, I definitely understand that you want to have some semblance, some sense of the qualifications and the background of a candidate. But again, I'm going to be very careful about treading too hard over privacy concerns with that as well. Like for example, everyone has to submit an application to the board, to the borough office, borough president, in terms of what they do, everything else. But that's not public record. So I'd want to be very careful about requiring something that isn't necessarily required, and necessarily putting people's information and contact information and work things and things of that nature. And just to be blunt, because unfortunately not everyone respects that in terms of leaving board business is board business, and all of a sudden they want to start going to people's places of employment. So I just think it's very something that we need to make sure that we're cognizant of in terms of understanding. We want to understand those things. There may be questions, and maybe there's some opportunity for limited questioning. But I just want to make sure that, from my capacity as current chair, that is a concern that I think we really need to take seriously.
I think that's fair. I think, again, the nominations committee, like, we can have a conversation about it, but at current also, like, we want to think about what kind of requirements are going to exclude certain segments of the population from participating. I think that there's privacy is one thing, and understanding conflict of interests is one thing. We also want to make sure that we're not creating parameters that are going to exclude certain segments of our population, like maybe folks who are older and don't have a LinkedIn, or folks who don't have access to the technology to create a resume, right? Like, being able to share your bio, and perhaps we also want to ask people to name certain things, and we should check in with Fred as well to make sure that, like, we're following all the correct rules. I think the point is well heard and understood from Jay and Teresa that they're concerned with conflicts of interest, particularly on this executive group. But we should also acknowledge the fact that a lot of decision-making happens across the board and also in committee, and that not all decision-making, almost no decision-making, lives exclusively with the executive board.
I have my hands raised.
Go ahead,
So my suggestion, and I hear what's happening, perhaps we can mention or say how many years you've been in the community, what job are you working on, something that is a neutral kind of thing to get a sense, of your involvement, or what's your thought on that? Without making it so personal or intrusive in a sense.
Yeah.
That
I think that could work.
Okay.
I think that could work. I think, what we've done in the past is asked folks to provide some sort of written bio, or to share a written bio during the conversation. I think to Teresa's point, it's nice to provide them in advance so that folks can read through it before the meeting. But I also think that we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We're getting caught off track with folks who are not on the committee making suggestions about what the committee should do. I think those points are well heard, but we also have not yet gone through the proper steps to do what we need to do and actually execute on an election, which is our job. And so the first thing that we need to do, right, to Fred's point, is we need to select a chair just to bring us back to our agenda. Then after that, we're going to talk about the process for conducting the elections, and then we'll go through next steps, and then we'll adjourn.
Is it premature to nominate you, Primo, as the chair of this committee, since you seem to be doing such a good job of keeping us on task? And
I have done it. I have done it in the past. I think, you know, I'd be happy to do it again. I'd also be happy to support somebody else who wants to take on this role.
Okay, I
Well, as
believe
the
I heard
gentleman
from Mr.
suggested,
Wolfling.
yes, I
Right.
mean, you'll take
I
on,
believe,
you made the
I
step,
believe I
you
heard
made the
from the
first step
floor a motion for Primo as service
as
chair.
chair. Yeah, I heard it
Okay,
too.
is there a second to that motion?
I said I heard it too, so that's me saying yes.
Okay, well, I heard it moved by Mr. Wolfling. That was you, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And,
Okay.
this
Is there a
Felice
second to the motion?
Robertson. Yes.
Elise, is that you? Are you
Yes, it
seconding?
is. Yes, I am.
Okay. So I have a motion on the floor. It's moved and seconded for Primo Lasana to serve as chair of the nominations committee. Is there anyone else who wishes to run?
I'm thinking about it, Fred.
Police, I'd be happy to yeah, we can certainly I'd like to nominate Felice as chair.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor to nominate.
Hey, no, I just nominated you as chair.
I'm sending it back in your direction. You said you'd consider it.
I nominated you as chair. No, I was talking about it's running for a seat as far as.
Understood. I see.
Yes.
Understood.
Running for an officer position? Okay.
That's fair.
That's what I was
So
thinking of, yeah.
that's good to know. So we will get there further down the line, but for sure. That's good to know, Felice.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Also, so just to conclude this business, so is there anyone else who wishes to be considered for chair of the nominations committee? Okay, I hear none. Is there already hands raised or anything? Primo, can you see?
I see a hand raised from Teresa, but I can't tell if it's an old hand raised or if it's a new hand.
Okay, actually, that's
The
a
hand
piece
is
of
down
business.
regardless. The hand is down regardless. There we go.
Okay, all right. So seeing no other nominations, okay, seeing no other nominations, we're gonna end discussion. So the motion currently on the floor is for Primo Lasana to serve as chair of the nominations committee. We will call the question. All those members of the nominations committee in favor of the motion, please say aye for the record.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members in opposition? Any members of the nominations committee in opposition who wish to vote no? Please state your name for the record. Okay, hearing none. Are there any members who wish to abstain from the vote? Please state your name for the record. Okay, I hear no abstentions. All right, hearing a majority in favor, the motion passes. Primo Lasana will serve as chair of the nominations committee for 23 for this election cycle. Thank you very much, Chair Lasana. At this time, I turn the meeting over to you to conclude the business of the committee. Complete the
Thanks,
agenda.
Fred. And thank you, members of the committee. Excited to work with you. We're gonna do some good stuff. We're gonna get this right. So let's just go really quickly through process one more time.
Mr. Chair, I apologize if I could very quickly. I
Yeah.
actually have to jump off. I'm not able to stay for the rest of the meeting. But I just want to thank you again and to say thanks to all the members of the nominations committee for agreeing to serve. This is a very important part in terms of helping us to get that leadership structure set up for next year and continue the success of the board. I do want to say to the point that was made by the member, Ms. Robertson, members of the committee are not precluded. This is something we have inquired on earlier, so it's a point of information. Members of the committee are not precluded on running for an officer position. The only thing that would be required is at the appropriate time they recuse themselves if there's any matter in terms of the election, the election of the office they're seeking. But with that being said, I thank everyone again. Everyone a good night, and the district office is committed to helping you in any way possible in terms of making this a smooth process as we can.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
Good night.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Fred.
Okay. So I can give you a little, like, folks on the committee, a little bit of background and kind of like what my experience with this process has been in the past, things that I've noticed have worked well, things that maybe we want to switch. And then I think like we should have a conversation about the issues that Teresa and Jay have raised here and other items that maybe we may want to enter into the process as well. So really like it's a question of the next 2 weeks. That's actually quite important. So we have this meeting on May 23rd, at which point we need nominees to kind of make themselves known so that we can execute on the board meeting in June. It's also a space for folks to be able to nominate themselves should they want to, but frankly, the process always runs a bit smoother when we are able to confirm who those nominees are in advance of the meeting. It certainly makes the nominations committee look better, and it also allows those candidates a bit more time in preparing any statements that they may want to make or any bios that they may want to make available. So what I've done within this 2-week window in the past has been, this may not be popular, but I think it works, is to just call every single member of the board. We can do like kind of both calling and emailing, but considering that we're a 5-person group, that's a call list of like 10 folks per person to get to our 50 something odd members. Only about half of them are going to pick up anyway, and you'll spend about 15-20 minutes on this task. But the personal touch of placing a phone call and allowing folks to ask questions, talking to them about the roles, can be a good way, first of all, for you as board members to engage with other board members, get to know them. And then also just for them to feel like it's a little bit more personal and like we took on a bit more. So what I'd suggest is that we do a combination of kind of both sending out a larger blast email to folks to allow them to respond to. And then the other piece would be placing phone calls, making sure that we're reaching everyone. There's also about 30 emails a day that go out from Community Board 9. It's really easy to miss a blast email from us about nominations committee. And so placing that phone call gives us just an added layer of security and assurance that everybody knows that the process is live and kind of what they need to do. So
I'm in favor of that. I think it's a nice division of work. And I actually had no idea that we'd have access to every community board member's, privileged information, their email and their phone number. That's pretty, I don't know, but I think we can all be trusted with that information. So yeah, I think it's a good system.
I've done it before, and FEMO is correct in what he's saying.
So it went well for you that time, Felice?
It did. And in doing so, we wrote down the date in which we called. And when they said that we didn't, by having it on my phone, I would say the date and time in which I did call you, because some people denied that I did, or that someone did. Okay. So yes, it works. It was very effective.
Yeah, exactly. I think Felice makes a good point too, right? It's kind of a liability cover because somebody's going to say, well, I had no idea that these happened and nobody called me. But you can say, well, actually, I called you on, May 19th and left you a voicemail. And so it's a good way to make sure that we're truly reaching everyone. And I think it's a more equitable way to do outreach than just sending emails.
It also sounds like there's like a log where every one of us would record our contact or our outreach efforts so that we've all got that in one place. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I'd suggest is kind of like that we put together a Google spreadsheet. We'll have the office put together a Google spreadsheet for us. And I think that, let me just pull up a calendar, but I think if we basically just give ourselves the rest of this week to get all of that information kind of in one place, and then we choose to make phone calls before the end of next week, which is the 19th. So next few days, make sure that the board office has given us everything that we need to execute by Monday. Then by Monday, we kind of give ourselves as a group the amount of time that we need to execute phone calls from the 15th to the 19th. And if there's kind of like any concern around what those phone calls look like, you don't need to talk through folks about every single role and what its function is. But we can also ask the board to give us definitions of every role so that we have something of a script to operate from should questions arise. But I would say, if you ever face a question that you're not sure what the answer is, just say, I'll make sure to ask that question to the community board office and follow back up with you, right? So part of it is us taking notes in a Google Doc also as to which questions arise. Janelle, go for it.
Yeah, Primo. So once we make these calls and send out these emails, is there a way in which we will memorialize that information on those board members who express interest in running? I'm not sure if we've done that like that in the past, but I think that would be like a nice touch, just so we have an idea of who wants to run for what before the May 23rd board meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think one of the ways that we can do this is allow people over the phone to tell us which roles they are nominating for. I think we can also ask people to reply to the email that gets sent out. So they could use either kind of function. They can reply to the email, or they can tell us over the phone if they'd like to run for a position and have that announced by the 23rd. We could probably just give them a deadline of the 22nd. So, you know, if at worst we call the last folks on Friday, the 19th, we give them the weekend to think about it. Send us an email by Monday, the 22nd by 5 o'clock. That way, by the time the board meeting rolls around on Tuesday afternoon, the 23rd, we all have a comprehensive list of who has nominated themselves before the process begins. Does that sound right? I think another way to do this is like with like a Google form, but frankly, I find that again, technology can be difficult for some members of the board. And so offering multiple modalities for folks to nominate themselves can be a bit more of a democratic process.
It really sounds like you've done this before.
I've interacted with members of the board before, and I know that there is just a variance, of course, as there would be with anybody in kind of how they like to engage. Sorry, Janelle, did you have any ideas as to how you'd like to collect that information?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I can do this. However, I am an Excel wizard. I use Excel every day. I don't mind being like the holder or the manager of like maybe like potentially getting everyone's like responses, or everyone finding a way to get that information over to me, and I can sort of like manage that. That's just a suggestion, and I'm open to doing it. So yeah.
That's a yes. I humbly accept your offer to manage our Excel spreadsheet. I think, yeah, if you could make us just like I'll ask the board to generate like an Excel spreadsheet for us. Maybe you can take that and flip it into something that's really functional for this group with like drop downs and like, spaces for notes and like, did you talk to a person? Yes, no. Did you leave a voicemail? Yes, no. Like, what time was the call? And that can probably get us set up to begin making calls by Monday the 15th, if you think you could do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I can actually generate it myself too. I mean, if I'm allowed to do that. So
You can
that's just
generate it
something.
yourself, and then
Yeah.
we can get you the info to plug into it.
Sounds great.
My understanding is that none of the kind of rules around privacy information for board members has changed. I think that the nominations committee, I did it last year, and so the nomination, maybe it was 2 years ago, I don't know. But the nominations committee should remain the same way that it was either last year or 2 years ago. So we should have access to all that information. And what I'll do is just fire up an email after this asking for a listing of all of the community board members, their phone numbers, their email addresses. Let's of course make sure that we keep that internal to this group. And then what I was going to, okay, so just like taking quick notes here. So we have list, contact information, blah, blah, blah. And then the other piece we wanted was a brief description of each of the roles. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Great. And then is there any other information that you all feel like would be really helpful to have on hand as you place these calls?
I think that's it, at least that I can think of.
Yeah. I think the only other question that folks may ask is kind of like, what's the process? And then I think, for us to have a script that kind of brings us back to the original points that were being raised by Jay and by Teresa, which were around what are we going to ask folks to provide? I think, suggestions thus far has been kind of like, if you have a resume, please provide a resume. If you have a LinkedIn, please provide a LinkedIn. And maybe a third option is, if you're not comfortable providing either, please provide a brief written bio.
Sounds good.
Okay. Great. Do we need to have a deadline on that? And I mean, I guess it would be the 22nd, huh? it's kind of asking for a quick turnaround. The thing is, the election isn't till June, you know? And so the question is like, why are we gonna ask people to turn around this information so quickly by May when we could simply present this information in June and give folks a little bit more time to be more thoughtful?
I think identifying, having everyone identified that wants to run for the
Mhm.
May 23rd, asking those people to submit their CVs or linked, whatever their credentials are by maybe mid-June, so that people have enough time to look at them before the voting meeting.
Mhm. That sounds good to me, John, if that sounds good to other folks. Any objections to that process?
None.
Okay, sounded like an endorsement from police.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I just like want folks to understand a little bit about from a process perspective is kind of like how the election itself is executed. And so because this is a election of officers, our bylaws state that there have to be paper ballots. We're not going to use paper ballots, but we are going to use electronic ballots, right? We need something with a record that is clearly stated. So how we've done this in the past is kind of like working with the board office to identify a survey system essentially that will meet our needs for an election like this. What we've done in the past has been a Google form or a SurveyMonkey. Those are just kind of like the two platforms that we've utilized. I think the last one we used was a Google form. I prefer Google myself, and so I may push for that. Are there other platforms that we're not considering that we should be considering?
So we're not going to do a roll call vote for all 7 positions?
We will not.
I'm joking.
But I mean, don't
No.
talk about it, because that's the kind of thing that you might see happen in a meeting. Okay.
So who would set up I've never done a SurveyMonkey. Is that something we ask?
We'll ask the board office to do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So they'll execute on that for us. I think also just from a perspective of what's the word I'm looking for? Confidentiality or liability, impartiality. We want the board office to be in charge of the election itself.
I think also I'm thinking about this outreach that we're going to be doing next week. I was initially thinking, well, if there's 5 of us, we're each reaching out to 10 people. That's only 2 a day. But I think what I'm going to try to do is call as many people as I can on the front end of the week, just to try to get more people, and then the rest of the week I'll catch all the stragglers. So
totally, you'll get through all the calls in a half an hour. That's what I did last year, was just, you'll end up talking to 2 people for 5 minutes each, and every other conversation will take 30 seconds.
Okay.
That's correct. So what I did is I called open.
So Felice, I believe agrees and said she did the same thing.
Right.
Great. Is anybody on the nominations committee also, if you're uncomfortable with placing calls, I'm happy to take on somebody's call list, and just let us know via email. That's totally fine. And Janelle, I think what I'll do is I'll defer to you on kind of breaking out this group according to the calls. And so once you kind of send this group an email, then we can get things started at your command, once we have the Excel information from the board office to fill out the sheet that you're going to make, and we can go from there. But I think the hardest part of the lifting comes in the next few weeks. I'll also make sure that what we're doing is putting together a nice email draft so that we can get out an email to the entire board about this process. And in that email, I don't think I'll include too much information. It'll probably be, election is happening, we need nominations by May 23rd. You can be nominated in advance, which is well preferred to nominating yourself at the meeting. If you can provide a bio, resume, LinkedIn, please do. We'll be placing phone calls to just to create some transparency around process. We'll just name what we're doing. And I'm indifferent as to when that email goes out. I think that I want the board to approve. I'd like to just run it by our board office to approve kind of what that looks like. It may be sent from the board office actually. And so what we may do is just draft an email for them to send on our behalf as a committee. And email could go out on the 15th, which is probably ideal because like it goes out around the same time that we begin making calls. Or it could go out later that week at some point. I think I would personally target the 15th as an ideal date. Sound right?
So I'm reading through, there's a 9-page document that was sent out earlier today. I thought I saw something in here that said you had to be on the board for a year before you could be elected to one of these positions, but maybe I'm confusing something.
That is correct.
Okay, so it's actually a lot less than 50 people that we have to reach out to because not everyone's been on the board for a year.
Yeah, I wonder if we should just make calls to everyone just to cover our bases so that we
Okay.
don't miss somebody and just
Okay.
say, hey, just wanted to make you aware that
Yeah.
the election process is underway. These are some of the things that need to be true in order. Thank you for bringing that up, John. That's a good point that just would have slipped through my brain. Yeah.
Okay.
And what we can do also is just kind of maybe we attach this document to the larger,
Yeah.
the large, so everybody has the same information. And so I don't miss any more things like that. For the sake of transparency, I'm also, like Felice said, I'm also considering running for a position. I don't know which one, but I haven't served on the executive committee yet. And it feels like time to step up and join that group at some point. So it's also something that I'm considering. And we should probably call each other too, you know?
Yeah, should we have a follow-up meeting?
We should
mean-
probably have a follow-up meeting, yes. Would it be good? Let's schedule that now. Just to make sure that it works for everyone. I do prefer these like 6:30 or 6 o'clock times if they work, so that we can all have an evening after. I promise to get you out of meetings as quickly as possible because I know the pain that exists with the length of these meetings. Sometimes will be comprehensive, but we will be swift. So let's take a look at calendars and see what works best. I think that we probably want to meet before the 23rd. We probably want to meet before the 23rd. Let's take a look and see what we've got. I could meet on the 22nd. I am free on Monday, the 22nd in the evening. I also could make a meeting happen before the general board meeting on the 23rd.
Monday, the 22nd also works for me.
Works for me too.
Felice, Omari. 22nd, I'm getting a thumbs up from Felice.
That works.
Great. Can we call, is 6 o'clock a good time?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's do 6 o'clock on May 22nd. We're gonna look extra buttoned up on the 23rd. And that's the way I like to show up. So for me, at this point, I have my marching orders, my next steps, which are to reach out to the board office around a list of folks for outreach. We are going to draft an email to go to the larger group. Janelle is going to take that information, that contact list information, and turn it into a wonderful spreadsheet for us that will track our activity as a group. And Janelle will also break us out according to who should be calling whom. And then we'll meet again on May 22nd to make sure that we are very clear on our intent heading into the meeting on the 23rd. I'm also going to follow up around an electronic ballot. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that everybody who's on this committee is just CC'd on all of my emails to the board office, just so that you can see where we are with everything. Any last thoughts, considerations, anything? Oh, Jay, go for it.
Just a quick suggestion, maybe something on the website, or maybe there could be a little link for like a nomination thing or something, maybe on the front page saying if you're interested, here's a link, here's what we'd like to see in terms of various questions, maybe something telling the different board chairs to add to the agendas, where everybody who has each committee chair, okay, mention that there's a nomination, that there's going to be nominations coming up, and if anybody wants it, go to the website, see what they want, sort of like agenda item, and also on the website too. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. I think there's no harm in putting on the website, although our audience is only internal to the community board. It's not really, but I think it's good to let the community know that the process is happening, right? So for the sake of transparency.
I have something that I'm really not sure the right venue to bring this up in, but I was on a board or a subcommittee call last night, and one of the executive committee members was on that call, and it was exhibited some kind of embarrassing behavior, and I think disqualifying behavior.
I'd say give me a call later.
Okay.
About it, but
Okay.
I think ultimately behaviors that you see are typically behaviors that recur in spaces. So I have a feeling I know who you're talking about, and I have a feeling that everybody else knows about this person's profile as well. And folks usually show up the same way in recurring instances. So I think, that's part of the reason that we ask for folks to have a year of service on the board, because we're able to get to know board members.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay.
It's a good flag though. And in case anybody wants my phone number, I'll send it around to folks afterwards as well.
Okay.
We all have each other's contact info.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, committee. Really appreciate your time, your commitment. I'm really excited to go through this with y'all. We have a great mix of kind of new folks and expertise, some veterans on this group, and I can't applaud enough every single person for raising their hand to do this work. I think that it's important work. It's important work to execute in a way that is clean and unquestionable in its product once it's executed. What we want to do is set up the larger board for success, meaning that we have elections that have taken in input from members of the public, folks on the board like Jay, like Teresa, that encourage as much transparency as possible and encourage the greatest level of confidence in those members that we will elect. So we want our folks to be irreproachable, and it's our job to set them up for success like that. Anything else, Jay? Go for it.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not on the board, just to.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks.
Members of public and the board. So Teresa's on the board and you're a member of the public. We appreciate you coming, Jay, as always. And Teresa, we appreciate you coming as well. Khalid, you have the minutes, I think, for our time together. And
Yes.
I'm going to send an email once we get off this call to the board office. I don't have everybody here's email yet, so forgive me if the first email doesn't have you CC'd on it. The second email will. All right.
Okay.
Everybody have a great night. Take care, and thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.